Hi, Wombo here, and I would like to take a moment of your time to discuss Game of Thrones. Nothing new there, but today instead of breaking down an entire episode, I'm going to be dissecting Tywin's introduction from Season 1, Episode 7. And I must warn you, dear viewer, this scene is too good. That's not a joke, it's too good. It's such a brilliantly layered introduction to such a well-realized character. It's so close to literal perfection that I'm really not sure it's by design. I acknowledge that Dave and Dan wrote some fantastic additions into the show, but a large part of me doubts that they realize exactly what they achieved here. I mean, later statements have me doubting that they ever understood Tywin's character.
I don't think of him as evil.
I would call him lawful neutral.
You serious?
We're talking about the same Tywin, right? The one who had Tyrion's first wife gang-raped by his soldiers and made Tyrion watch? The guy who in the last episode unleashed the Mountain and his men on a civilian population?
They took our women.
Yes, I'm very demure.
Then they took them again.
Very neutral.
When they was done, they butchered them as if they was animals.
Very lawful. These are some insightful takes, Dave and Dan. What's next? Ramsay Bolton is chaotic neutral? But putting aside these cringeworthy statements, this scene is so outlandishly good that I don't care if it's by accident, because it somehow introduces every layer of this beautiful onion of a character near flawlessly. And there's a distinct layer that many viewers seem to miss. This layer being that while this intro works overtime to sell Tywin as the biggest badass in Westeros, it simultaneously communicates that he is absolutely full of shit. However, much of the audience, like Jaime in this scene, completely misses this because Tywin is just that skilled at controlling how others perceive him. And I direct a lot of the blame/praise towards the actor, Charles Dance, who brings such an enormous presence to the character that it's hard to not assume he's just right about everything he says. So real quick, let's get some context. Recent tensions between Lannisters and Starks have finally reached the brink of war. After 2 failed attempts on Bran's life, both of which the Starks blame on the Lannisters, Catelyn abducted Tyrion and took him to the Vale for a trial. Tywin sent the Mountain and his men without banners to attack villages in the Riverlands. It's still painfully obvious who ordered these attacks and why. In fact, I'd argue Tywin wanted Ned to know it was him because the point of this threat is don't fuck with House Lannister. But the bannerless element provides just enough plausible deniability that Tywin could have gotten away with it if Robert was the one to act instead of Ned. And he still could get away with it since Robert gets the final say. At least, from Tywin's perspective. Because please remember for the duration of this video that Tywin does not know Robert is about to die. He's also unaware that Ned in the last episode uncovered the incest reveal and is ready to tell Robert in this episode. So I would argue this initial act of retribution, however cartoonishly barbaric, is strategically sound. Tywin expects Robert to see Tyrion released and knows this bloodshed is unneeded. However, his whole MO is he wants people to fear him and his house, so he will jump at the opportunity to get payback before Robert can call a timeout.
They burned our fields, our granaries, our homes. They covered our children in pitch and lit them on fire.
This absurdly cruel act of revenge and clear threat to the Tullys is brought to Ned's attention while Robert is away on a hunt, and Ned uses the opportunity to declare the Mountain a criminal and summon Tywin to court. So now we can finally get to the scene in question. We open with Jaime reading the court summons out loud to Tywin. We learn later that Jaime struggled with dyslexia in his younger years, and Tywin basically told him, "Just get good," forcing him to spend many extra hours of his day devoted to reading in order to compensate. Here, Jaime briefly pauses while reading and goes,
Gregor Clegane, the Mountain,
and ends the letter a bit stilted.
to be branded an enemy of the crown.
This is minor enough that I suppose it could be a happy accident, but it always reminds me that Jaime has dyslexia, so it gets brownie points. The first thing Jaime does is try to bond with his old man by hyping him up as a serious threat.
Poor Ned Stark. Brave man, terrible judgment.
The first thing Tywin does is insult Jaime's decision to assault Ned.
Attacking him was stupid.
Let me ask you, what would Tywin have wanted Jaime to do? Stay on the Kingsguard and sit by while the Lannisters and Starks duke it out? By publicly attacking Ned on his way out, Jaime is emulating his father's behavior. Jaime covers his bases even better than Tywin. Jaime never intended to kill Ned, knowing full well it would doom Tyrion and bring Robert's wrath down on his family. He confronts Ned after Ned has quit his hand of the king, and Jaime only attacks Ned after he claims direct responsibility for Tyrion's capture. Jaime sends a message that even in the streets of King's Landing, just hours after quitting his job as vice president, the Lord of Winterfell himself is not safe from Lannister vengeance. On top of all that, this choice came bundled with Jaime abandoning his post as Kingsguard for the first time since he was a child. This is a dream come true for Tywin. Now, I'm not saying Jaime made the smartest choice, far from it, but lines like this,
I suppose I should be grateful that your vanity got in the way of your recklessness,
are some grade A hypocrisy coming from Tywin. So why does Tywin say this? Well, cause he's a pompous hypocrite and he's priming Jaime for what comes next. This whole scene is Tywin starving his son of approval so he can present him with a single way to earn it, effectively manipulating him into doing his bidding. And because Tywin thinks he's hot shit, he tries to act like he's imparting some wisdom onto his son when he's just bullying him.
Why is he still alive?
Obviously, Tywin understands that killing Ned would be tremendously stupid, but he asks because he's looking for an avenue to tug on Jaime's insecurity, which Jaime serves up on a silver platter.
It wouldn't have been clean.
Remember, Jaime's real reason for sparing Ned is that it would have guaranteed Tyrion's death, so giving this explanation seems to be his way of avoiding having to declare his undying love for Tyrion, because he knows Tywin doesn't want to hear any of that. This answer gives Tywin exactly what he was looking for, another chance to take a jab at his son.
You spend too much time worrying about what other people think of you.
This coming from Tywin is hilariously hypocritical and totally unfair. I don't know if anyone in Westeros cares more about how others perceive them than Tywin fucking Lannister. It's kind of his whole thing. He derives most of his power through his larger-than-life reputation, and he works tirelessly to preserve it. Jaime tries to say he doesn't care at all what people think of him, only for Tywin to say,
When you hear them whispering Kingslayer behind your back, doesn't it bother you?
Of course it bothers me.
Jaime admits that it does indeed bother him, and it clearly pains him to admit this. He was bullshitting when he said he couldn't care less what others think of him. Tywin calls him out, and Jaime concedes. Remember this moment going forward. But also, Jaime doesn't say, people would have called it dirty. He says it wouldn't have been clean, as in Jaime personally considers such an act dishonorable. People's reactions may really bother Jaime, but contrary to what Tywin is suggesting, Jaime really doesn't let other people's views change his decisions, as evident by all the horrific shit he gets up to throughout the series. Unless, of course, he just means Jaime shouldn't have so many feelings about it, in which case, this is Tywin showing off his lack of empathy. So Jaime worries about what others think of him. Is it because he's a little bitch? Maybe. Or maybe it's because after killing the Mad King and saving almost 1 million lives, the most heroic thing he's ever done, he was labeled a Kingslayer and now is despised by most people he interacts with. Almost everybody sees him as dishonorable and untrustworthy. In Westeros, being known as someone who can't keep a vow robs you of many opportunities afforded to the nobility who demonstrate, well, nobility. It's not just sentiment, there are practical applications in this setting to being trusted, which is why this next statement is utter horseshit.
A lion doesn't concern himself with the opinions of the sheep.
I know people like this line, and I do too, but probably for different reasons than most.
Ah, look. More shit.
This is the most glaring example of Tywin's horseshit in this conversation, because later when he explains his true beliefs, they will hardcore contradict this statement. This is just a slogan. Tywin really wants all the sheep to know that he's a big scary lion. If anything, he should be able to empathize with Jaime's desire to preserve his reputation. But the difference is that Tywin sees no value in behaving ethically or honoring his vows, whereas he sees tremendous value in making people fear him. The kernel of truth in this statement is that this is how Tywin views himself compared to others. He is a lion and everyone else is a sheep. He is driven and defined almost entirely by his ego, deeply rooted in his father being seen as a laughingstock, one that nearly ruined their house thanks to what Tywin saw as a weak reputation. This put him in a perpetual state of avoiding anything resembling that same weakness and all the humiliation that he associates with it, because he believes himself superior and needs to be seen that way by everyone else, an unhealthy trait which happened to serve him well in rising to power. Then Tywin gives Jaime 30,000 men and instructs him to attack Riverrun, saying they will remind Catelyn Stark that Lannisters pay their debts. A Lannister always pays his debts almost perfectly sums up how Tywin operates. Although I think the phrase, a Lannister always pays his debts with insane amounts of interest, would be more accurate. Tywin, instead of denying his involvement and petitioning for Ned's resignation, you know, like an actual fucking politician, decides to attack the ancestral home of House Tully. The purpose of this is twofold. Firstly, to triple down on sending retribution for Tyrion's abduction, and secondly, to tell Robert and Ned that he's going to war before he's going to court. Make no mistake, this is a wild decision. This is an act of war so egregious even Robert couldn't ignore it. Tywin isn't the only one who has to worry about keeping up appearances. Think about how many houses Tywin is involving here. He attacks House Tully in response to an order given by Ned Stark, who also happens to be the Baratheon king's hand and best friend. And let's not forget the Tyrells and the Martells. They would gladly take a slice of that Lannister pie. Tywin is starting a war that, at present, he cannot win. But lucky for him, Robert is about to die and the whole realm is about to fracture. So he conveniently escapes some serious consequences for some very reckless decision making. Jaime's like, I didn't realize you valued Tyrion that much. And Tywin explains,
He's a Lannister. And every day that he remains a prisoner, the less our name commands respect.
This already puts into perspective how Tywin views all his children, not as their own individuals with needs and desires, not humans that he cherishes and enjoys the company of, but as legal extensions of himself, tools to be used in his political games. He doesn't truly love or know any of them. He only understands as much as he needs in order to manipulate them and only likes them for the utility that they offer. But also,
And every day that he remains a prisoner, the less our name commands respect.
whoops. Tywin just explained why what other people think matters right after saying that what other people think shouldn't matter to Jaime.
Yes, I can definitely smell shite.
So the Lion does concern himself with the opinions
No,
of...
that's not an opinion, it's a fact.
Daddy, chill.
Now that he wants to explain his actual thought process, he's revealed that he dropped this line,
A lion doesn't concern himself with the opinions of the sheep.
just because it sounded cool. And this is what I mean when I say I don't know if they meant to make the scene this good. I'm sure they meant to show off a bit of Tywin's hypocrisy and arrogance. I just don't know if they meant to or realized how good of a job they did.
opinions
No,
of...
that's not an opinion, it's a fact.
There is a difference, but it's not the one that Tywin is trying to point out. It's not a difference between fact or opinion, it's a difference between fear and honor. Tywin values one and he doesn't value the other. And Jaime taking a single jab at him is too much for his ego to stomach. So impulsively and angrily, he tries to correct his son. He pretends the parts of reputation he is worried about are matters of fact, implying that the parts of reputation Jaime is worried about are truly just opinions. But Jaime killing Ned would have been a fact, and Jaime being a Kingslayer is a fact. Remember how Jaime conceded to bullshitting seconds after being called out? Here, his father fails to do the same just moments later.
So the Lion does concern himself with the opinion...
He loudly states there is a difference, but rather than adequately explaining the difference, he just restates that he can't let people get away with thinking they can cross him.
If another house can seize one of our own and hold him captive with impunity, we are no longer a house to be feared.
Which only highlights the contradiction Jaime pointed out, but thanks to his delivery and framing, he convinces Jaime that he's just destroyed him with facts and logic. This is what I'm talking about. Tywin is the master bullshitter, because underneath that carefully maintained facade of sheer badassery and laser-focused competence, he really is just a massive piece of shit. He's not contradicting himself or failing to recognize said contradiction because he's dumb, but because he has one goal in this conversation, and that takes priority over everything else, whether it be being logically consistent or being fair to his son. He goes on to give his motivation, explaining that the only thing that survives this world is the family name.
It's all that lives on. Not your personal glory, not your honor.
Once again, this is a dolled up version of the truth. In a way, it's very true, but as far as Tywin prioritizing the family name over his personal glory, I think he, perhaps subconsciously, sees them as one and the same. He stubbornly tries to force his inheritance on the one kid who willingly disinherited himself, with a vow that lasts for life. From a Tywin point of view, Tyrion and Cersei are his two biggest assets, but he neglects them out of some very short-sighted prejudice. Prejudice informed by the culture, aka the opinions, of the people surrounding him. He dies because he hated his son, and his entire house crumbles shortly after because he neglected his daughter. Maybe if this lion wasn't so concerned with the opinions of the sheep, he would have closely mentored his dwarf son and his whammon daughter, both who had massive potential, and entrusted them with his legacy instead of dying on the hill of find some legal loophole to make Jaime my heir because he looks like Prince Charming. People seem to think Tywin is hyper intelligent and that's how he gets so far ahead in the royal rat race, when I would argue the main thing that gets Tywin ahead is that he's fucking evil. Tywin is willing to violate law, tradition, basic human decency, all for the sake of furthering his own station. He's fine with betraying allies and exterminating entire houses, and he knowingly employs people who enjoy raping women and killing children. He isn't an effective politician because he's some gigabrain genius. He's an effective politician because there isn't a single line he won't cross, which poetically will prove to be his downfall. This contrasts perfectly with Ned, who dies because of his principles, but it's those same principles that cause thousands of people to fight for him and his children years after he's gone. The Stark legacy is infinitely stronger than that of the Lannisters because despite what Tywin thinks, ruling through fear and violence only ever works in the short term. And this is one of those scenes that just keeps on giving. Even the skinning of the stag is multi-layered, and if I had a nickel for every time season 1 used a stag carcass to foreshadow Robert's death, I'd have 2 nickels. It also symbolizes how Tywin isn't afraid to get his hands dirty and engage in some straight up butchery. He goes on to tell Jaime that he has many blessings, and that he squandered them by serving on the Kingsguard, further tearing him down and showing a wanton disregard for what Jaime values. Tywin tells him the fate of their house will be decided in the coming months. He closes the distance and holds his son's face. I believe this is the only time we see them touch in the whole show, as if Tywin did this to give his son a sample of what affection and approval could look like. And then he tells him how to get it.
I need you to become the man you were always meant to be.
This means one thing coming from Tywin. It's time for you to abandon the Kingsguard and become my heir. That's what you were meant to be. Once again, Tywin doesn't care about what Jaime wants or needs. He doesn't even try to understand why his son wants to be a Kingsguard. What he wants is for Jaime to go all in on House Lannister, and the subtext is, that's how Jaime can win his approval. And he walks back to the stag knowing this manipulation did the trick. This is a pretty glorious scene. Every layer of Tywin is present here, even the ones you don't initially pick up on. And that's my favorite kind of writing. The kind that makes you dig through all the subtext and really figure out how a character thinks and feels. You know, like a real person. If you don't believe me that Tywin is the master bullshitter, give the show a rewatch and see if you spot what I did. Who knows, maybe you'll realize Tywin actually is the sharpest tool in the whole bunch and I'm the one who's full of shit. Let me know what you think in the comments. Quick shout out to Ellis, my one and only Patreon. Super appreciate you. The Best of Thrones video for 7 is gonna take quite a while longer. Not gonna give an estimate because we all know how that goes. But I am gonna drop some season 5 coverage soon, and you'll get the episode 8 breakdown in the meantime. You might even get an Andor video, but we'll see. If you made it all the way here to the end, then an extra big thank you for sticking around. If you like what you saw here today, consider checking out the rest of the channel and, you know, maybe hitting that subscribe button. You've probably heard it a million times before, but it really does help. That's it for the video. Hope you all have a great rest of your day, and in the light of the 7 wombos, I bless you.